I had walked that hallway 1,000 times before, but that morning felt different. The glass walls reflected me back in fragments. My tie slightly crooked, the faint shadow of stubble on my chin, the tired eyes that belonged to a man who hadn't slept much in weeks. I told myself it was just another Monday, but the silence of the office gnawed at me. Too quiet. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed hesitant, as if they knew something I didn't. When I reached my desk, the first crack appeared. My nameplate, black letters on brushed silver, the one I had polished absently with my sleeve for over 20 years, was gone. The wood looked naked without it. A small cardboard box sat on the chair instead, open and waiting, like a coffin too small for the body it was meant to hold. I stood there for a long time, staring, before a voice called from down the corridor. "Hey, the boss wants to see you." Just that. No smile, no nod. My co-worker disappeared quickly, as though even pausing beside me might be dangerous. I carried my body like it was made of stone toward the CEO's office. Each step echoed in the polished marble floor, ricocheting in my chest like a heartbeat I couldn't slow. I had been in that office countless times. For project briefings, for late-night strategy sessions, even once for a drink to celebrate landing a big client. But today, the air felt thinner, harder to breathe. The door was already open. He was standing by the window, framed in light, the city sprawled behind him. His cologne hung in the air, sharp, expensive, familiar, the same one I had given him years ago after we closed our biggest deal. He hadn't even bothered to change brands. "Come in," he said, turning with that politician's smile I had once mistaken for sincerity. I sat, though my legs wanted to run. He leaned against the edge of his desk, arms crossed, rehearsed. I knew that posture. It was his bad news stance. I had seen him deliver it to others, but I had always assumed I was untouchable. He cleared his throat. "You've been with us for what? 23 years now." 24, I corrected softly. My voice sounded foreign in the sterile air. 24, he repeated, nodding as though the number meant something. "That's commendable." Commendable. A word you use for a soldier who didn't make it home but fought bravely. Then came the speech. Corporate jargon dressed up as inevitability. The industry is changing. Efficiency demands innovation. We've invested heavily in AI systems that can handle most of what you do, and frankly, they do it faster, cheaper, without the risk of human error. Each word landed like a stone in my gut. I stared at the carpet, tracing the patterns in the fibers, as if they could tell me this was a nightmare. "You're saying I'm replaced," I managed. He tilted his head, sympathetic in the way a doctor might be before delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Not replaced, transitioned out. The future doesn't need as many hands." Hands. That's all I was to him. Not a mind, not a soul, just hands. I wanted to argue, to remind him of the nights I stayed until dawn finalizing contracts, the holidays spent alone in the office while my marriage withered at home. I wanted to point to the scars on my life that had the company's initials engraved in them, but all that came out was a hollow laugh. "After all these years," I whispered, "you're really letting a machine do my job." "It's progress," he said. Cold, efficient, the word he loved most. Progress. When it was over, I stood, numb, and walked out. The box was waiting for me, open-mouthed. I filled it with the small fragments of my existence. A coffee mug with a fading logo, a picture of me and the team from years ago when we still laughed together, a stack of pens that never wrote quite right. My hands shook as I placed my father's old wristwatch inside for a moment, then pulled it back out. That watch was older than the company itself. It ticked steadily on my wrist, reminding me of time's indifference. As I carried the box out of the building, I could feel eyes watching me but never meeting mine. The walk of shame. The funeral march for a man who had given everything and was leaving with nothing but cardboard. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time in years, I saw my reflection clearly in the polished steel. My suit was wrinkled, my hair thinner than I remembered, my eyes hollow. I asked myself the question I had avoided for decades. Who am I without this place? When I got home, the silence was suffocating. No congratulations, no comfort, just the echo of my shoes on the hardwood floor. I set the box on the kitchen table and sat there in the dark. The watch ticked. Each second mocked me. I stared at the blank screen of my computer, its black surface reflecting a ghost of me. Tired, broken, adrift. My hands curled into fists on the table. The cardboard box sat between us like a barrier, filled with relics of a life already gone. I waited for tears, for anger, for something. Instead, only numbness filled me. A quiet so vast it felt like the ocean had swallowed me whole. And in that silence, I realized this was only the beginning. I didn't fall into the company by chance. It was my first real job out of college, the kind of opportunity you didn't say no to if you wanted to prove yourself. My father had pressed his wristwatch into my hand that morning, the same watch I still wear. Time is your only real currency, he'd told me. Spend it wisely. At the time, I thought I understood. To me, time was meant to be invested in climbing, in building a name worth remembering. That watch ticked against my skin like a drumbeat, urging me forward through every long night, every impossible deadline, every sacrifice I justified as temporary. The early years weren't glamorous. I worked in a cramped cubicle, its walls plastered with printouts and sticky notes. I was the first one in every morning, the last one to leave every night. I can still remember the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the break room at 10 p.m., the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the aching satisfaction of sending off a proposal just before midnight. That life became my ritual. The CEO wasn't always the man who stood before me with rehearsed indifference. Back then he was ambitious, but human. He'd stop by my desk occasionally, clap a hand on my shoulder, and say things like, "You're the backbone of this place. You know that?" I believed him. I let those words sink deep, like a promise carved in stone. As I rose, I gave more of myself away. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, dinners. My wife, at the time, used to leave plates of food in the fridge with notes that read, "Warm it up. Don't forget to eat." Sometimes I did forget. Other times I came home so late that the food had gone bad. One night, I stumbled in at 3 a.m. to find her sitting on the couch in silence. No TV, no book, just silence. Her eyes looked past me, as though she could already see the ghost of the man I was becoming. "You're married to them," she whispered. I tried to laugh it off, tried to remind her of the bigger picture, the life I was building for us. But the truth was written in her face. She wanted me, not the man climbing the endless ladder. That was one of the red flags I ignored. I told myself she'd understand when the promotions came, when the money made everything easier. But money never bought back time. She left a few years later. Divorce papers signed, her perfume lingering in the apartment like the echo of a song I could no longer remember the words to. I buried myself deeper into work. The company became my refuge, my justification, my identity. And the CEO, by then, a rising star in the industry, fed that hunger. He invited me to drinks after hours, talked to me like I was his confidant. Once, after we landed a massive client, he poured us 2 glasses of whiskey and raised his in my direction. "To loyalty," he said. I lifted mine without hesitation. To loyalty. The glass clinked, sealing something I thought was brotherhood. But in hindsight, It was more like a contract I never signed, binding me to a man who saw loyalty only as a lever to be pulled. I should have noticed the cracks sooner. There were moments when he took credit for my ideas in board meetings, offering me only a passing nod while basking in the applause. There were times he reminded me that no one is irreplaceable, said with a smile that was almost playful. Almost. I laughed along then, not realizing it was a warning. Even my colleagues tried to caution me. "You give too much," one of them told me over lunch years ago. "He'll bleed you dry if you let him." But I shrugged it off. I wore my exhaustion like a badge of honor. My father's watch ticked on, each second a reminder of how much I was spending on the climb. The further I ascended, the more I lost pieces of myself. Friends stopped calling when I cancelled one too many plans. My apartment filled with tokens of the company, plaques, branded pens, photos of me shaking hands with clients and executives. I thought I was building a legacy. In truth, I was building a prison lined with smiling photographs. And yet, I felt proud. For years, I believed the climb mattered. When I looked at my nameplate outside my office, David Miller, Senior Vice President, it wasn't just a title. It was proof. Proof that the sacrifices meant something, that the long hours weren't wasted, that my father's watch hadn't been ticking in vain. That's why the betrayal cut so deep, because it wasn't just a job they took from me. It was the story of my life, erased in a single afternoon. I think back to the night my ex-wife told me I was disappearing. She wagged.
As right. I had traded everything, love, health, friendships, for a seat at a table where loyalty was nothing more than a word used in toasts and speeches. Now, when I recall the CEO's cologne in that office, the same one I once gifted him, it feels like mockery, like he was wearing my devotion on his skin all along. I realize, with a weight that crushes the air out of me, that I didn't just lose a job that day. I lost the illusion that my time, my only real currency, had been spent wisely. The watch ticks on, steady and unbothered. Time moves forward whether I deserve it or not. And in the silence of my apartment, with the box of corporate relics staring at me from the table, I finally begin to understand the terrible truth. I didn't climb a ladder. I chained myself to it. The days that followed were strangely quiet. At first I told myself I would use the time to rest, to finally breathe after 24 years of running. But rest never came. Sleep slipped away in fragments, leaving me half awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling fan as it cut circles through the dark. The box from my desk still sat on the kitchen table. I hadn't unpacked it. It loomed there like a coffin in the center of the room, daring me to acknowledge it. Every time I passed by, I caught a glimpse of the photo on top. Me, 10 years younger, standing shoulder to shoulder with the CEO. Both of us smiling, glasses raised in victory. His cologne clung to my memory when I looked at it, that same expensive sharpness that now made me sick. I stopped answering calls. A few colleagues reached out at first, awkwardly, offering condolences dressed as curiosity. "How are you holding up?" they'd ask. But I could hear the hesitation in their voices, the fear of being associated with me. Soon, the calls stopped altogether. I told myself the company would crumble without me, that I'd read headlines, Ines proving I'd been essential. In some ways I wasn't wrong. Within months, stories began to circulate. The AI system mishandled contracts, made errors that cost millions. Clients pulled out. Employees whispered about chaos in the boardrooms. I thought vindication would feel sweet, but instead, it tasted like ash. Because while the company stumbled, I was collapsing faster. Bills piled up on the counter. Severance disappeared into rent, into groceries, into nothingness. My apartment grew smaller with each overdue notice taped to the door. The watch on my wrist ticked on, relentless. Each second another reminder that time was no longer pushing me upward,
but dragging me down. I tried drinking to fill the silence. Whiskey mostly, whatever was cheap enough to numb me, but strong enough to burn. The first glass gave me warmth. The second made me forget. The third left me staring into shadows that stretched too long. Some mornings I woke on the couch with the bottle still in my hand, my shirt stained, my mouth dry as ash. The cardboard box watched me. Always there, always patient. One night, after too many drinks, I found myself pulling out its contents one by one. The mug, chipped at the rim, the branded pens that barely worked, and then the framed photo, the one of me shaking the CEO's hand when I was first promoted to senior vice president. My hair darker then, my eyes alight with pride, his smile wide, teeth gleaming like victory. I stared at it until something inside me snapped. With a yell that tore my throat raw, I hurled it against the wall. Glass shattered, raining across the floor in tiny shards that caught the light like cruel stars. I fell to my knees, picking up the broken frame, and sliced my palm open on a jagged edge. Blood welled up fast, bright against the photograph. It smeared across my younger self's face, staining that proud smile into something grotesque. And in that moment, with pain searing through my hand, I realized I was still alive. Broken, yes, but alive. The bank's letter came the next morning. I tore it open at the kitchen counter, my bandaged hand shaking. Final notice, the headline read. Foreclosure. I had 30 days to vacate. 30 days before even the hollow comfort of my apartment would be stripped away. I sank into the chair, letter in one hand, watch heavy on the other wrist. My father's words echoed in me. Time is your only real currency. Spend it wisely. Had I spent it wisely? No. I had squandered it. I had traded hours, years, decades for a loyalty that meant nothing. And now time was calling in its debt. Merciless. I spent days drifting between anger and despair. Some hours I imagined storming into the CEO's office, throwing the broken photo at his feet, demanding he face what he'd done to me. Other hours I just stared out the window, unable to move, the weight of nothing pressing harder than any job ever had. The nights were worse. Shadows crawled across the ceiling, whispering failure. The tick of the watch grew louder, almost mocking. Once, in a fit of rage, I tore it from my wrist and flung it across the room. It hit the wall and fell, but when I picked it up it was still ticking, unbothered, as if to say, "You may collapse, but I will keep moving." That persistence, that indifference, it planted something small inside me. Not hope, not yet, but defiance. I began to notice things when I walked outside, clutching a cheap cup of coffee I couldn't afford. The city's rhythm, the way strangers hurried past without looking at me, the posters advertising new tech, new futures, new worlds. For the first time I wondered if maybe there was still a path beyond the ruins. But the collapse had to complete itself first. The 30 days passed. I packed what little I had into boxes smaller than the one that carried my career home. I left behind furniture, dishes, pieces of a life that no longer fit me. Standing in the empty apartment, the air smelled stale, like a mare. Emery left too long in the dark. The last thing I picked up was the watch. I fastened it to my wrist again. The tick was steady. I walked out the door without looking back. That night, I slept in my car. The city felt enormous, its lights harsh and uncaring. I thought of the CEO then, how he was probably sleeping on silk sheets in a penthouse, oblivious to the wreckage he'd left behind. The anger flared hot, but it didn't consume me. For the first time, I realized I didn't want to be consumed anymore. The collapse had stripped me bare, of home, of career, of illusions. But in that bareness, I felt something stirring, a seed too small to name yet, buried under the rubble of who I had been. And as the watch ticked through the night, I closed my eyes and thought, if I am nothing without the company, then I must build a new man entirely. The city had drained me dry, so I left. There was no dramatic farewell, no crowd at the train station, just me, a duffel bag, and the steady tick of my father's watch against my wrist as the bus pulled out of the terminal. The skyline faded behind me, steel and glass dissolving into distance. For the first time in decades, I had no title, no desk, no one waiting for me on the other side. The ride west was long. My mind drifted between memories and silence. Sometimes I caught the faint trace of cologne in my head, the one that had once meant camaraderie, but now smelled of betrayal. I pressed my wrist to my nose instead, grounding myself in the quiet tick of the watch. At least, that still belonged to me. When I finally stepped off the bus in California, the air hit me differently. Salt and seaweed, warm asphalt, and the faint sweetness of jacaranda trees blooming purple along the sidewalks. After years of sterile offices and recycled air, the ocean breeze felt like medicine. I rented a small room in a rundown boarding house near the coast. The wallpaper peeled, the pipes groaned at night, and the mattress dipped in the middle. But it was mine. No nameplate on the door, no corporate logo on the walls, just a key that turned in the lock and a window that opened to the smell of the sea. At first I drifted. I walked the beach at dawn, when the water was steel grey and the gulls called out like old friends. I sat on benches, watching strangers pass. They didn't know me, didn't care what title I had lost. Their freedom was contagious. I started writing in a cheap notebook I picked up at a corner store. At first, it was just fragments, memories, regrets, words that wouldn't leave me alone. Then it became habit. Each night, I emptied myself onto those pages, and little by little, the silence inside me began to shift. The cardboard box had come with me, shoved into the corner of my small room. One evening, I opened it again. The broken photo frame was still inside, glass shards wrapped in a shirt to keep them from cutting me again. I took the photo out, studied my younger face, and this time, instead of smashing it, I slid it into the notebook. A reminder, not of pride, but of blindness. Days stretched into weeks. The ocean became my confessional. I walked barefoot at the shoreline, letting the waves swallow my footprints as fast as I made them. Each erasure felt like mercy, like the water was telling me it was okay to start again. It was at one of those walks that I overheard a group of people sitting on the sand, laptops open, talking in words I didn't fully understand. Machine learning, neural nets, algorithms. They laughed easily, argued passionately, their eyes lit with curiosity. For the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me that wasn't bitterness. I didn't approach them that day. I just listened, tucked the words away like seashells in my pocket. Later, I Googled them in the public library, my fingers stiff on the keyboard. I didn't understand most of what I read, but the rhythm of learning, of being new at something, sparked an old fire. At a local cafe, I saw a flyer. AI meetup. Free, all levels welcome. I almost threw it away, but the watch ticked on my wrist, steady, insistent, as though urging me to spend my time differently this round. I went. The first meeting was in the back of a community center. Maybe 20 people sat in folding chairs, laptops glowing, wires everywhere. I hovered by the door, ready to bolt. But then a voice called out, warm and gravelly. "You lost? Or you joining us?" The man was older, 60s maybe, with kind eyes and hands that looked like they had built things rather than signed papers. His name was Richard, a retired engineer. I mumbled something about being new, about not belonging. "Nonsense," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Everyone starts somewhere. Sit. Listen. The machines don't bite. So I sat. I listened. And something in me, something that had been buried under years of corporate obedience, leaned forward. Richard took me under his wing. After meetings, we'd linger over coffee. He explained things slowly, drawing diagrams on napkins, comparing algorithms to engines and gears. I found myself staying up late with tutorials, notebooks filling with scribbles and questions. For the first time in years, I wasn't working for anyone else. I was learning for me. The healing wasn't sudden. Some nights, I still woke to the ghost of cologne in my nose, to dreams of the CEO's voice telling me I was transitioned out. Some mornings, I sat staring at the box in the corner, fighting the urge to drown in whiskey again. But then the ocean air would seep through the cracked window, or Richard would send me an article, or my watch would tick against my wrist like a metronome, steadying me. One evening, Richard asked, "Why'd you come here?" "Really?" I hesitated. Then I told him everything. The company, the years lost, the betrayal. He listened without interruption, his weathered hands folded on the table. When I finished, he leaned back and said simply, "Then good. You've been stripped down to nothing. That's where real building begins." His words sank into me like the tide into sand. For so long, I had thought my collapse was an ending, but maybe it was just demolition before reconstruction. The weeks turned into months. My notebooks filled, my code improved. My walks along the shore felt less like escape and more like communion. The ocean no longer erased me. It carried me. The cardboard box still sat in the corner, but it had changed too. It was no longer a coffin. It was a reminder, a symbol of what blind loyalty had cost me, and of the fact that I had survived. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to believe I could do more than survive. The first year in California felt like shedding skin. By the second, I was growing something new. The days began with the ocean. Dawn light spilled across the waves, a pale gold that shimmered and broke apart with each swell. I walked the shoreline in silence, listening to the pulse of the tide. It reminded me of the watch on my wrist, steady, relentless, unbothered by the chaos of men. That rhythm anchored me, told me I was still here, still moving forward. When I returned to my small rented room, I didn't collapse into despair anymore. I opened my notebook, or my laptop, and worked. Code at first looked like a foreign language, strange hieroglyphics on a glowing screen. But day by day, line by line, it began to make sense. Where once I had written memos and contracts, now I was writing commands for machines to follow. It felt almost poetic. The same technology that had stolen my place was now becoming the tool with which I rebuilt myself. Richard was patient. He laughed at my frustrations, praised my small victories. "You've got the discipline," he said more than once. "Most people quit when it gets hard. You've lived through hard already." I began attending meetups regularly. At first, I sat quietly, listening to 20-year-olds debate neural nets with the arrogance of youth. But gradually I started asking questions. My corporate past, once a source of shame, became useful. I understood clients, contracts, leadership, the human side of what they didn't teach in textbooks. Where they saw only code, I saw people. Where they built systems, I imagined businesses. Months rolled into years. My notebooks multiplied, stacked high on the shelf, filled with diagrams, algorithms, half-baked ideas. The cardboard box still sat in the corner, untouched, but now it no longer haunted me. It was a reminder, a warning. Never again would I give away my soul to a title, a nameplate, or a man wearing cologne. The turning point came during a hackathon in San Diego. I almost didn't go. Large groups still made me uneasy, but Richard pushed me. "Just see what happens," he said. The room buzzed with energy, keyboards clattering, whiteboards filling with equations. Teams formed quickly, ideas sparking like fireworks. I joined 3 younger programmers who, though skeptical of me at first, welcomed the ideas I offered. We didn't win, but by the end of the weekend, we had built something small but functional, a prototype AI tool for optimizing shipping routes. It wasn't much, but holding that laptop in my hands, watching the program run, I felt a surge of pride I hadn't felt in decades. Not pride in pleasing a boss or climbing a ladder. Pride in creation. That night, back in my room, I laid the laptop beside my father's watch on the nightstand. The old and the new. The past and the future. Both ticking forward. I started consulting for small startups soon after. At first, I charged little, almost embarrassed by how rusty I felt. But word spread. This older guy with the corporate scars and the sharp new mind who could bridge the gap between tech and people. My calendar filled slowly. Money trickled in. The foreclosure and the cardboard box no longer defined me. The more I worked, the more I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was gathering. Knowledge. Skills. Viz. One afternoon, while sketching ideas in my notebook at a cafe, I paused. I looked at the page, a simple outline for an AI platform that integrated human decision-making with automated efficiency. The kind of balance my old company never understood. They had believed in replacing people. I believed in empowering them. For the first time, I thought, I could build something real, not just for others, for me. The idea consumed me. I rented a co-working space with peeling paint and flickering lights, but it was enough. I hung a whiteboard on the wall, scribbled until my fingers cramped. The watch ticked on my wrist through late nights, through empty cups of coffee, through failures and revisions. I called the project Aletheia, the Greek word for truth, because that's what I wanted. Systems that didn't just crunch numbers, but revealed hidden patterns, gave people clarity. Not machines replacing humans, but machines revealing truth to humans. The first investors I pitched laughed politely. Too small, too idealistic. But I didn't break this time. I refined, I sharpened, I knocked on more doors. And then, one said yes. It was a modest sum, but enough to breathe life into Aletheia. Enough to hire a small team, bright minds who, for reasons I still don't fully understand, believed in me. We worked out of that peeling co-working space, fueled by coffee and conviction. Each milestone was a resurrection. Our first client signed on. Our first results exceeded expectations. The day I saw a business owner's eyes light up as our system saved them weeks of wasted resources, I knew I had built something worthy. The watch on my wrist became a partner in the journey. I would glance at it during long nights, its steady tick a reminder that time was no longer an enemy. It was an ally. Years passed. Aletheia grew. Investors stopped laughing. The co-working space gave way to a real office, sunlight spilling through wide windows. My team expanded, diverse and passionate, people who didn't just see me as the boss, but as someone who had walked through fire and refused to come out bitter. And then, one morning, I opened a news article on my phone and saw it. My old company's logo, splashed across headlines. AI disaster costs millions. Lawsuits mount. Clients abandon ship. Employees fled. And at the center of it all, the CEO, my old mentor, my betrayer. His photo showed him pale, drawn, eyes sunken. The cologne I once associated with power seemed laughable now. I sat back in my chair, phone trembling in my hand. The vindication should have felt explosive, triumphant. Instead, it was quiet. A flame, steady and controlled, burning deep in my chest. I closed the article and turned back to my work. My empire was not built on spite. It was built on survival, on rebirth, on truth. But part of me knew the story wasn't finished yet. Because men like him, men who fed on loyalty until nothing was left, they don't just vanish. They come crawling back when the empire they built on sand finally sinks. And when that day came, I would be ready. The watch ticked on. It began with an email. The name in my inbox froze me. I hadn't seen it in years, but the letters were etched into my memory like scars carved into wood. Martin Calhoun. The subject line was short, requesting a meeting. I sat in my office, the hum of servers filling the silence. Sunlight filtered through the wide windows of the space I had built. My space, my empire. On my wrist, my father's watch ticked, steady, patient. Time had carried me here. Time had carried him, too. But we had walked very different roads. I clicked open the message. His words were polished but desperate. He wanted to reconnect. He wanted to explore opportunities for collaboration. He wanted, though he didn't dare phrase it outright, help. I leaned back in my chide. For years, I had imagined this moment in the shadows of my mind. Yet when it arrived, it wasn't accompanied by fireworks of rage or gloating. It was quiet, inevitable, like the tide rolling back in. I agreed to meet. The cafe I chose was neutral, public, but not noisy. A polished oak table by the window, the smell of roasted beans in the air. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. Martin looked smaller. His tailored suit hung loose, like it no longer belonged to him. His hair, once sharp and manicured, was streaked with grey, thinning. But what struck me most was his eyes. The old glint of superiority was gone, replaced by something I never thought I'd see in him. Fatigue. And yet, faintly, that same cologne trailed behind him. Fainter now, as if watered down, but unmistakable. The scent that once meant power now reeked of desperation. "Good to see you," he said, forcing a smile as he sat across from me. His voice was hoarse, thinner than I remembered. I nodded, but said nothing. For a moment we sat in silence, the weight of years pressing down between us. I thought of the glass-walled office where he once delivered my execution sentence. I thought of my desk, emptied before I even knew I was gone. I thought of the cardboard box, the blood on the broken photo frame, the foreclosure notice, the ocean air, the first line of code, the name Alethea. All of it led here. He cleared his throat. "You've done well," he said carefully. "I've been following your work. Alethea, it's impressive." Still, I said nothing. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "My company has faced challenges. The AI system we invested in, well, you know how that turned out. Cost us millions. Clients left. Investors pulled out. Lawsuits, bad press. We're on the ropes, and frankly..." He hesitated. His jaw tightened, as if saying the next words physically pained him. "We could use someone like you, someone with vision, someone who understands both people and AI. Perhaps we could work together again." I let the words hang there, suspended in the cafe air. He was begging, though he disguised it in business language. The same man who had once told me, "No one is irreplaceable." I glanced at my watch. The second hand ticked smoothly, indifferent. Time had not betrayed me after all. It had revealed the truth. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm, steady. "You replaced me with a machine. Not because it was better, but because it was cheaper. You erased me from my own life with a single meeting. And now, after everything collapses, you come to me." His face flickered. Shame, anger, denial. all fighting for dominance. I made mistakes, he admitted quickly. But the market was changing. The board was pressuring me. I cut him off. No. Don't blame the board. Don't blame the market. This was you. You chose convenience over loyalty. You chose arrogance over truth. You chose to believe that men were disposable, while machines were eternal. Tell me, Martin, how eternal does it feel now? His lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't answer. I leaned back, studying him. The man who once towered over me across a glass desk now looked like a shadow of himself, hunched, diminished. For years I had dreamed of this sight, and yet the satisfaction wasn't cruel. It was clean, simple, justice. You want a job, I said quietly. He swallowed hard. Yes. I nodded slowly, as if considering. And what would you do? File papers? Write memos? Because the future we're building doesn't have room for men who don't see people. The future belongs to those who understand both, the human and the machine. And you... I paused, letting the silence cut him open. You never understood either. His eyes dropped. For the first time, I saw him break. I stood. The cafe around us blurred. My pulse was steady, my breathing calm. The watch ticked on my wrist. I don't need you, Martin, I said, but you. You'll spend the rest of your days needing me. And that's your punishment. To know that the man you discarded built an empire while you built ruins. I left him there, sitting in silence, staring at his own reflection in the cafe window, a ghost of the man he used to be. Outside, the air smelled of roasted coffee and faint sea breeze. The California sun was warm on my face. I lifted my wrist, watching the second hand of my father's watch tick forward. Time hadn't mocked me after all. It had remade me. Betrayal had been the fire, but rebirth was the forge. Justice, I realized, wasn't revenge. Justice was standing free, while the man who once defined me sat begging in the ruins of his own making. I walked away, not with rage, not with triumph, but with peace. The sharp mind had returned. The man was whole again, and for the first time in decades I was free.